So good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. My name is Rob Patridge, and I'm the chair of the Oregon Liquor Control Commission. And we're happy to host these meetings. I think this is meeting number 8 of the, number 9 is tomorrow night. So 8 of these meetings. We've seen almost 2,000 people face to face from all around Oregon. The commission is happy to sponsor these events, to get out and have an informal discussion, to see what's going on around the state. To learn about your thoughts related to Measure 91. We're really trying to focus our conversation on hearing from Oregonians about those things that we can control at the Oregon Liquor Control Commission. We don't control the taxes. The legislature controls that. We don't control things like, we don't control the taxes, we don't control where the money's going to go. Many of those kinds of things we'll continue to get questions about. We'll try and redirect those questions. And we may cut you off on occasion, but we don't want to cut you off because we don't want to hear from you. But we're going to cut you off so we can focus on those things like marketing, packaging, how you're going to obtain your license, how all those things are going to work. Those things that we as members of the OLCC can really affect. You know, this was a measure that was passed by Oregon voters. 56% of the people said yes, 44% said no. And as I've told people at every single one of these sessions, I voted no on Measure 91, and I'm very clear and open about it, and I've made no bones about it. But I'm also the chair of the commission, and as the chair of the commission, I have a responsibility to put this measure into place in the right manner and in a safe and responsible manner for Oregonians. We're not here to step on the air hoses. We're not here to do those things. The voters have spoken, so now's our time to make sure that it's done the right way. And so I want you all to be respectful of each other as we continue to move forward. We're here to gain information from you, and we're here to gain information from all sides. But the measure has been settled, and we're trying to solicit those responses from people about now how to put it in place. So let me give you the basics related to Measure 91. The measure was approved by voters in November of 2014. It gives OLCC, these 5 commissioners, the authority to tax, license, and regulate marijuana in the state of Oregon. There are 4 license types that were allowed under the measure. Those license types include the producer or grower's license, the processor license, a wholesaler's license, and a retail license. So there are only 4 specific types of licenses that were allowed in the measure. Licensees can hold multiple types of licenses. Unlike alcohol, where you can't, except maybe if you're like a brew pub or something, you don't get to produce, distribute, and retail the alcohol generally. Okay, the rest of the basics. The excise tax in Oregon is paid at the grower level. Unlike Colorado and Washington, which have taxes at multiple levels, the tax in the state of Oregon is paid only at the grower level. The net revenue distribution is not decided by the OLCC. It can be changed by the Oregon legislature, but this is what Oregonians voted for in the measure. 40% to the Common School Fund, 20% to mental health, alcoholism, and drug services, 15% to the state police, 10% to cities for law enforcement of this measure, 10% to counties for law enforcement of this measure, 5% to the Oregon Health Authority for alcohol and drug abuse prevention. Those were included in the measure that Oregonians voted on. The act does not affect the Oregon medical marijuana program. While there has been much debate related to the Oregon medical marijuana program and whether these programs should be combined and those kinds of things, the OLCC has no authority to act to combine programs or affect the Oregon medical marijuana program. There's some synergies in the program that we're interested in as the OLCC, and we have probably will have some recommendations related to the legislature, and we'll talk about some of those things later. But just so people are clear on where we're at with the medical marijuana program. We will ask you some questions related to the medical marijuana program and the merger, not because we have any effect over that, but because the legislature knows that we're out here talking to Oregonians, and they want our feedback as well. So they're using us as a sounding board of what's going on. The act allows the home grow of up to 4 plants and 8 ounces per resident beginning July 1st, 2015. The OLCC has no control over the home grow provisions. We don't regulate the home grow provisions. There's nothing in the act that provides our ability to regulate those provisions. The act prohibits consumption in public. You can't smoke in public. You can't take marijuana in public. You can't eat brownies in public. You can't eat edibles in public. You can't do any of those things in a public area. Okay? There's no provision for lounges or bars or those kinds of things for marijuana. The Act does not allow local governments to tax marijuana. I know that there are over 100 local jurisdictions in the state who have passed measures that are interested in taxing marijuana. The OLCC does not get to decide whether those local jurisdictions can tax marijuana. That is something to be worked out either in the legislature or that's something to be worked out in the court system. But again, we're not going to talk, the OLCC is not going to talk about the taxes. We don't have anything to do with that tax level. Localities may opt out through general election. If 10% of the voters in a given jurisdiction in a city or a county sign up, put it on the ballot, they can opt out of having licensees in their jurisdiction. All right? It still allows, you know, the homegrown personal use and those kinds of things, but they can opt out. What many people don't know is that you can also opt out of liquor, though we don't have cities and counties in the state of Oregon who have opted out of liquor. But that's just a fun fact. Federal considerations. We have, you know, federal considerations related to this, and you're all aware of this, and the OLCC is very aware of this. Marijuana remains illegal under federal law, all right? So it's a business risk, right? So we just point that out to everybody. However, on August 29, 2013, the U.S. Department of Justice issued guidance to the states that have legalized recreational marijuana. They've issued guidance under what is called the Cole Memorandum, C-O-L-E. So the Cole Memorandum provides the guidance to states that are putting recreational marijuana into effect. The Cole Memorandum doesn't have the force of law. It's merely an opinion of the U.S. Attorney's Office under the current administration. Administration to administration could change that, so it doesn't have the force of law. If you'd like to look at the Cole Memorandum in its original form, go to marijuana.oregon.gov, and you can download or look at online the Cole Memorandum, okay? Federal guidance. This is the main points of the Cole Memorandum. So the main points of the Cole Memorandum are to 1, prevent the distribution of marijuana to minors. 2, prevent revenue from the sale of marijuana from going to criminal enterprises, gangs, and cartels. 3, prevent the diversion of marijuana from where it is legal under state law to other states. So we don't want it going out of state, no interstate commerce. 4, prevent state-authorized activity from being used as a cover for illegal activity. We don't want to be growing things in the recreational market and then all of a sudden they're all over the country. So that's what they don't want to have happen. 5, prevent violence and the use of firearms in the cultivation and distribution of marijuana. 6, prevent drug driving and other adverse public health consequences associated with marijuana use. 7, prevent the growing of marijuana on public lands. And 8, prevent marijuana use on public property. Those are the 8 kind of principal points of what the Cole Memorandum says. But again, go to marijuana.oregon.gov to take a look at the original by yourself. In order to meet the precepts of those 8 points from the Cole Memorandum, both Colorado and Washington and the state of Oregon is now looking at right now and in the process of preparing a request for proposal for a seed-to-sale tracking system. We don't feel that we can comply with federal law without having a seed-to-sale tracking system. All right? I already said Colorado and Washington require it, and the reason they require it is so that taxes are properly collected and that the inventory does not migrate from the residential market into a black or gray market. So that's the reason we have the seed-to-sale tracking system. It's designed for more effective audits and to satisfy federal guidelines. It's also for efficiency. We can't have people going to every recreational marijuana grow and whatever and individually counting every single plant. We'd have a fleet of auditors. We need to be able to go through and with RFID tags and be able to say how many plants are here and what's going on and are they properly where they're supposed to be and those kinds of things. It's for efficiency not only for us but for the operations. And that's what they do in a lot of the manufacturing industries today. So we mentioned before there were only 4 license types that were allowed. Those 4 license types, while we have more for alcohol, they're very restrictive in what they do. So the first type of license is a producer license. It's only able to cultivate marijuana. It's responsible for the payment of tax at the first point of sale. So for example, the commission had an educational session today. We're going to make some recommendations to the legislature. One of the things that we see as a potential deficit on the producer license is we don't be able to have this, kind of farm to table kind of thing that we have on the food products industry. Under the way the law, under the way Measure 91 was written, you can't be a grower, package it for retail, and sell it directly to a retailer. You've got to have 2 licenses. So that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to some of us. And so that's something that the legislature would have to change, but it's something that we as the commission are trying to look at. The processor license. The processor license packages and labels marijuana items, okay? Also, it would be the you'd have to get this kind of license to manufacture edibles and extracts, okay? In addition to that, we have a wholesale license. Those people that buy and sell at wholesale. So this isn't a required license, but as markets mature, wholesalers come in, so that license is anticipated by the measure. And the 4th and final license is the retail license. It sells marijuana items at retail to adults over 21 years old. So that's the retailer, that's the person who's doing it. That's the one who sets up the shops. So, but there are other licenses that the OLCC is considering asking the legislature about doing. One of the things is testing. We're interested in having testing. But if you were a testing facility, there's no way to get licensed to be able to hold the marijuana out of the recreational system. So those are some of the tweaks and things that, as the OLCC does its work, and as we work with the industry and we work with everyone to understand, where we work with local government, law enforcement, those are all the things that we want to make sure in the system, so that when your product's being transported from your facility to the test facility, that it's in this seed to sale tracking system, so if somebody gets pulled over by law enforcement or something else happens, you have a manifest that's clear where it started, where it's gone, where it's going, and the plan through the system. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. We're doing it for everybody's protection and transparency in the system. Advertising, packaging, and testing. This is going to be probably one of the biggest and hottest areas related to where OLCC is going to be involved. The Act gives us the authority to regulate or prohibit advertising. We can regulate packages and labels to ensure public safety and prevent an appeal to minors. And we can adopt standards and testing requirements. So this is an area where, we're in new ground, really. We regulate alcohol. Alcohol is it's regulated at the federal level. It all falls under the federal Constitution. So the rules are kind of clear. OLCC, for example, we don't approve any of the beer and wine and alcohol labels. That's all done at the federal level. So we don't have the internal infrastructure at the OLCC or the trained staff who's familiar with those kind of processes currently. So those are some of the things where we're going to be able to be seeking a lot of public input related to those types of items. Impaired driving. The Act does not identify a specific limit for driving, a blood level limit. Both Washington and Colorado, in their original measure, passed a blood level limit for impaired driving. Oregon does not have that, but I can tell you as a DA, we prosecute people on a regular basis all around this state for drug driving. So we currently have a system in place to deal with drug driving around the state, but the Act does require the OLCC to examine, research, and present a report to the legislature related to impaired driving in the state of Oregon related to marijuana. So what are we doing? We're working with the Department of Justice, Investigation Division, and the Oregon State Police to gather the data together to present that report. So we're trying to work with everybody, local government, but the state police is really the main place where all that information is gathered, but we're charged with that data collection and implementation report. So many people have asked what's the timeline for implementation, and I think you've all seen stories coming out of Washington and Colorado related to those things. We're trying to be very transparent with the public about what their expectations are. We're trying to keep within the spirit. This group is certainly very much into keeping into the spirit of the measure and keeping into the timelines. But our commission also acknowledges the fact that when Oregonians signed up and put their signatures on the initiative measure to get Measure 91 on the ballot, we also didn't have the experience of having 2 states legalize marijuana. So we also feel like we would be remiss as a commission, and I think the legislature feels the same way, that we would be remiss if we didn't learn from what's been ferreted out in both Colorado and Washington. So we want to keep with the spirit of it, but we're going to go slow, we're going to do it the right way, and we're going to do it in Oregon's way. We're not just going to, every single one of these states is different. So, January 1st, 2015, personal possession and home production become legal in the state of Oregon. Again, that was in the measure, and that's what's happening with personal possession and home production. Again, the OLCC does not regulate personal possession and home production. March through 2015, we will begin to notice rulemaking. We're probably only going to be able to put these rules in on a temporary basis just because of the timelines to hit our January deadline, with ultimately a final rules package coming forward. But through March through October 2015, there will be plenty of opportunity. What we're going to do is we're going to draft a set of rules, we're going to get an advisory group, and I'll go through more detail later. But that's what we're doing, is rulemaking March through October. Our hope is that by November of 2015, we will have a temporary rules package in place so that we can begin to tilt up the system. January 4th, 2016, this measure requires us to, as the OLCC, to begin accepting applications for licenses. So that's what it requires, is January 4th, 2016. Well, what does that mean? That means we've got to start accepting applications for licenses. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to walk into a retail establishment and buy marijuana across the counter January 4th, 2016. So late in 2016 is when we believe retail sales will begin. Why do we believe that? Well, I think people watched what happened in the state of Washington. They had this huge spike because there wasn't enough product in the market, and there was huge costs, and then it's flattened out and it's done all kinds of crazy things. Remember, this is an industry. Well, nobody on the commission does not believe we have a mature marijuana industry in the state of Oregon. We certainly do. We certainly have a brand and a reputation worldwide related to the marijuana that's grown in the state. That marijuana cannot come immediately into the retail system. It has to be grown in the retail system and tracked in the seed to sale system. There's got to be a harvest cycle. There's got to be processing and packaging approval, and then retail stores can come online. So that's why we're saying, realistically, late in 2016 is when we believe something will begin to come online. We also intend to process those applications in order of, growers, and then, producers, and then retailers. We certainly are trying to do that so that we can be efficient, so that we don't have some of the same pitfalls that Washington and Colorado have. All right, public engagement. You're here. You're obviously publicly engaged. But we have the listening tour. Again, I can't stress enough. How many people have gone to marijuana.oregon.gov? Okay. Well, if you haven't, take a look at it. Okay? Volunteers with expertise in the range of issues related to Measure 91. So we're going to appoint a Rules Advisory Commission to do that. We're going to include law enforcement, sheriffs, chiefs, DAs, local governments, cities and counties, from industry, growers, processors, testing, kitchen people, and retail, the proponents of Measure 91, and 3 other members of the public. That's kind of our intent.
So at this point, we usually take a few questions that are really focused on clarifying, not discussion-oriented. I promised you we're going to have time for that.
Yes, I've got a question on the board here. You mentioned everybody, and you have a DA, you have a real estate agent, an insurance agent. You see no conflict of interest with going ahead and setting these laws, in your case perhaps prosecuting them?
Okay, that sounds like discussion to me, but go ahead and answer it, and then you guys stick with clarifying right now.
I personally don't see a conflict of interest. These are recreational marijuana laws and rules that we're putting in place. I don't see the insurance guy's having a conflict. We don't have we have no direct financial interest in it. So,
and they will be stopped from, let's say, selling real estate to people, and for the person that does sell real estate, and they will be stopped from selling or having lists of people they can get insurance from.
No.
Yeah, that's what
we don't have any direct financial interest.
Okay,
but they will.
You mentioned that you'll be working with the industry. Is there a growers association involved, or is there a nonprofit organization that represents a growers association, like the wine industry, nursery industry in Tigard?
There are several grower groups around the state. We've had several of them testify before, as invited testimony before our commission, as well as the legislative committee. Most of those are private groups. The beer people and the wine people have something in statute. The distilling industry, the craft distilling industry, is asking for something in statute this time. At this point in time, though, marijuana does not have anything in place at that kind of state level. But I know that there are loose groups of growers around the state that that are organized, that we've been reaching out to, that are identifiable and have also reached out to us.
So you stated that these possible new rules in legislature won't affect the OMP program, but I just want to clarify specifically on House Bill 2040 that bans marijuana businesses within 1 mile radius of schools. That will have no effect on the OMP program for, say, existing grow sites?
What I would tell you is I don't know anything about that particular piece of legislation. The commission is really focused on, we don't have any control over the OMP. The only people that could affect that is the Oregon legislature. So you're right to look at those bills, but that doesn't do it. We don't have any control over those bills.
My question is on the impaired driving statutes. Some of us, no names mentioned, are trying to produce products that have 0 THC in them, and that is essentially for those who are possibly drivers and those who are possibly children. And how does that affect those folks that there is no THC, which I believe that's the active ingredient in there. So if there are only CBDs and stuff that helps seizures, I'm a grandma epileptic, so we would like to be able to control those things and not get high. And so are you folks setting up some form of clarification on that? Because I'm sure there's a lot of parents.
Well, most of that is most of those are under the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program. Recreational marijuana cannot be given to children at all. It's those over the age of 21. So most of that will be housed in the medical marijuana program, which again we have no regulatory oversight or ability to control that.
How many people are going to be on that rules advisory committee, and if that's determined like legislatively, or if that's something that you guys have within your power to determine?
So the rules advisory committee is at the commission level. It'll be director appointed, is at least the plan at this point in time. And we had the discussion today. We're waiting to hear back from staff tomorrow morning. The pitch today was having about 13 members on that committee, but it's through the OLCC. So and then there's a plan to do a bunch of subcommittees underneath that, especially to get some really specific knowledge.
Should there be restrictions on where marijuana businesses can operate? Yes, there should be restrictions on where they can operate. Red, no. Okay, largely green, but it's mixed. There are reds and a few yellows scattered within there. Wow, he's holding his up red. No!
And what we've heard from some of these jurisdictions is that we don't control jurisdictions, and some of the jurisdictions have asked the legislature to take a look at allowing them to maintain home rule, because each of us lives someplace else. And some of the concern is that from the state level, we'll start telling the cities and the counties how to run their communities. And so that's where that question kind of came from.
Should retail outlets be allowed to co-locate with medical marijuana dispensaries? Yes or no? Should they be allowed to co-locate with medical marijuana dispensaries? Very predominantly green, but This gentleman wants to speak.
I understand the commingling of both medical and recreational, but I feel the problem is medical got such a head start on recreational. The people that are already owning medical dispensaries, they have an unfair advantage. So for the people on the recreational side, you have to adhere by a different set of rules, and finding those limited spaces that are still available is becoming harder and harder, because if it's the same regulation, 1,000 people in a school, another dispensary, you're not getting the same platform for success.
One of the main concerns was already brought up, which is regulation. Law enforcement wants one system to audit. We've heard them say that over and over, so that's something that you're going to have to consider from their perspective. OLCC probably, they're not going to tell you right now, but they probably feel the same way. They want one system to audit. And beyond that, I think that if you're going to have 1,000 foot from each other buffers, where are you going to put a recreational store in Portland? Nowhere. There's 117 dispensaries in Portland out of 225 in the state. Okay, at least 110 of them are licensed.
Okay, yeah, so should there be a server type of permit in marijuana just like there is in alcohol? Green, yes. Red, no. Yellow, maybe. Okay.
Okay. So Tom, you've got somebody? All right.
I'm opposed to having them have a permitting process and adding
Okay.
another fee to the recreational system before it starts. First of all, the real issue that we're looking at is serving underage people. I think that's really the only concern in terms of the training at this point, and that's the only thing we have research to back up or anything to go on forward with. And I already heard the commission talk about implementing a potential card check measure against people who are found violating and serving underage people. So there's already a policy where they can hand down some consequences in terms of people who are breaking the law and serving minors. And beyond that, there's really not any sort of standard set or any sort of information to create this test that bud tenders are supposed to pass, and it just really doesn't serve any greater purpose, I guess.
I think there are a number of concerns about getting marijuana served to me as a consumer beyond just whether or not my gray hair says that I'm too old or too young for it. I want to know that the person that's grabbing that bud has washed their hands. Are they wearing a glove? Do they know the difference between indica and sativa? Do they have any idea what concentrates are, how long to wait for a cookie to kick in? There are a lot of concerns, and I want to make sure that the people that are serving, especially the new cannabis consumers that will be coming into, and the tourists, we don't want to have bad headlines like they had in Colorado. Let's make sure that our servers are licensed and trained.
Please don't confuse being served in a bar with buying recreational weed.
Okay. All right. Should there be limits on the size of commercial marijuana grow operations? And that's number of plants or canopy, yet to be determined, but should there be some sort of limits on the size of the grow operation? Mostly red, mixed, but mostly red, I would say. More red than green.
You know, similar to farming, I grew up on a farm when we weren't limited by how much corn you could grow. There's also lots of small farmers. They're not limited on their size. There's a lot of farmers that are big in the state, and there's a lot of farmers that are small. And it shouldn't be limited to, you know, you can only grow 5 corn plants or tomatoes. It should just be based on the regulations in place and the rules, you know, and as long as you're meeting that, you can do what you want.
We have no idea how many users of recreational marijuana are going to be in this state at this point. We have no idea. It's too early to put that into place and how large a grow operation needs to be. The grow operation will serve the clients that they sell to, and there's no way for us to know exactly what that will look like. And you know, if we put a restriction on it now, that will limit the size of businesses, it'll limit the number of people that they can serve, and so on.
Should there be different requirements for indoor and outdoor grow operations? Should there be different requirements? Oh, really mixed. And a lot of yellows. Is it important that marijuana growers have a security system? Should they have a security system? Okay, a lot of greens, mostly greens. So that's one of the things when we ask the first question, that's one of the things a lot of the audience would talk about is the different requirements for security with an indoor versus an outdoor. You have a couple of follow-up questions?
Yeah, so one of the big questions we've had, and one of the questions that's going to be on our mind as we prepare to put rules into place, how many people think that video surveillance systems should be required on any marijuana grow? Video surveillance at the grow. Huh? Well, then you should have a recorded video surveillance system.
And there's a lot of reds, it's really mixed, which is the issue of testing. So should the OLCC require testing of recreational marijuana for things such as potency, pesticides, and molds? Should there be a requirement for testing? Okay, that's pretty overwhelmingly green.
How many people would be in favor of requiring that the medical marijuana program adopt the same testing standard as the recreational program?
Okay, that too is overwhelmingly green.
This is something we're talking to the legislature about, so we appreciate your input on that.
Okay.
Does that mean we're going to standardize the actual labs themselves?
Yeah, we'll standardize the labs and the lab testing.
The fellow up here, the question he asked is will the labs be standardized? And that's a lot of what we've heard, is that you're getting, those of you who are having your product tested are getting really different results depending on the labs, and I'm seeing heads nod. So should edible recreational marijuana products be available? Yes, okay, that's what I thought. So should edible recreational marijuana packages contain information on dosage and serving sizes? Yes, okay, simple. Okay, so should we prohibit recreational marijuana products that may be appealing to children? This is where, yeah, we get more mix on this one. Should there be standards for what's required on labels, like there is on food, and you know what you're getting? So should there be standards set for what's required on the labels? And that's overwhelmingly green.
Thanks, guys, for having this meeting. I know that the statute in Measure 91 says there's not going to be the public use cafes scenarios. My question is specifically, is there going to be any kind of involvement for a private club style scenario?
So the OLCC, we don't believe, currently has the licensing ability or regulatory authority to have a license for a club-oriented business. So that would be something the Oregon legislature would have to tackle. So if you're interested in that, you'd have to talk to the legislature.
My name is Russ Melville. I'm the Executive Director of Portland Normal, and I want to thank you for having these listening sessions. I would encourage you as the Liquor Control Commission, in the gray areas where it isn't specifically dictated by Measure 91, that an operating principle should be, what do we do with alcohol? And so when you have questions like how big or how much should people be able to grow in a commercial setting, how much can they brew at Widmer? How much can they brew at McMenamin's? Is there a limit on them? If there is, apply it to us. When we're talking about serving, we're talking about retail licensing, we're talking about packaging. I don't think these questions are too hard to answer. We've already answered them with the most deadly, dangerous drug there is, alcohol. Apply that reasoning to marijuana and everything should be fine.
Hi, my name is Jeff Musalin. Kind of a response to that, I think there needs to be a strong focus on limits on growing, precisely because, as someone mentioned, there's no limits on corn plants, but this isn't a corn plant, this is a specific niche product. And Oregon's distilling and brewing industries have become the high points of the national scene that they are by letting niche markets grow. And if this is turned into something where 1,000-acre farms can produce tons, then the local growers isn't going to have a place or to compete. So will there be a focus and emphasis on letting small businesses become part of the scene?
I wanted to provide my perspective on just 3 quick issues, and you don't need to respond, I just wanted to say it. So one is that everything that you guys are doing, please do it with the mind of encouraging this industry and not restricting or reducing it, because we're at a stage right now where we really want to grow this industry. So, with the exception of necessary restrictions, we want to avoid any unnecessary hindrances on the industry. The second thing is when it comes to kids, I think we shouldn't be irrational or overblow the issue. Kids have access to marijuana today. They've had access for marijuana, 50 years ago. I don't think that putting bright colors on the label are going to make more kids smoke marijuana. I don't think we need to worry about that, especially when we're looking at them being available in adult-only stores. So don't get blown away by this idea of protecting our children. We've already established rules and limits that take that into account. And then the final thing is with regards to the limitations on the plants, canopies, acreage, whatever, I think that we need to take into account that we want to encourage economies of scale, cost savings, energy efficiencies, and things like this, and not put unnecessary restrictions that require us to do things that require excessive energy or that require excessive cost that would be a burden on the industry. That's it.
My name's Jackson McCormick. I'm a dispensary owner, and I wanted to talk about co-location and a couple ways to address that. I think the testing standard is a huge way to address that, and I think the Oregon Health Authority would be pressured heavily by myself and other dispensary owners to have labs adopt a standard, because as you said, we've all experienced here the issue with testing drastically differently between facilities. I think that would solve the biggest issue of co-location, where the marijuana program already requires customer-specific historical purchase information to be kept on site. That's more regulation than we're going to be requiring in the recreational market. I also don't think the seed-to-sale aspect is really that influential. I don't think people are rushing to be regulated and pay taxes and then are going to sell their product in the black market, or vice versa. I think that slows down the process of the recreational market hammering down the black market and eliminating it completely, because if we create a safe access and a legal access that pays good taxes, people are going to be interested in it, and all of the estimates so far indicate that the purchase price in Oregon is going to be ridiculously low. So I just really don't see the intense focus on the seed-to-sale aspect of the...
Thank you.
I have a comment about the limiting of the acreage or whatever for growers. I feel it should be limited because you're going to have a millionaire farmer out in Eastern Oregon with 6,000 acres, and then you're going to have a small person down in Eugene with only 2 acres. It really will help to limit it, because the small businesses will then have an opportunity to thrive. My other question is, there is an open container law for driving. Will there be an open pipe law or whatever? You know.
So currently there is no open container law like there is in alcohol. I know there's a strong interest, and the commission addressed that today as one of the items that that the legislature needs to take a look at so that we can have clarification.
Personal use is a kind of a gray area. You know, there's.
Right. No, we're well aware of the issues.
In my car, it's my personal space.
Okay.
I have an assessment and a question. An assessment is that you know, this industry is in, you know, its real infancy right now, and putting too many onerous regulations on the people who are going to be building this industry in its infancy, I think, as a general guideline, maybe is not the greatest idea in the world. As a question, I am curious what the review process is going to be over time, because you know, this is, the industry will be evolving. So is there going to be a review process, say, to review the regulations and, you know, then make changes accordingly, you know, change course?
Okay. I would tell you that the OLCC tries to regularly look at its rules on a regular basis. We have hearings, we have all kinds of things related to changing alcohol rules to meet the market. We had to deal with issues related to growlers, and we had to deal with all those kinds of issues. And we were market innovators that were pushing the rest of the country. So you have a staff and a group of commissioners who are committed to constantly re-looking at those things. So it's not just something we put on the shelf and then keep going.
I believe the creativity of both the edibles as products and the graphics used to advertise them should not be limited by if it appeals to children. If you as a consumer purchase an edible product, you need to be responsible for keeping it out of the hands of the children, just like alcohol.
I understand the importance of not overtaxing based on what's going on in Washington. But what my question is why is it just the grower? It seems like a burden.
Well, what I would tell you is that's what Oregonians voted on, and that's what the proponents of the measure put forward. And we didn't have anything to do with that at OLCC. I'm not sure why they did it that way. They've never provided a great explanation for me from that perspective. So I think that that's our best answer.
I work in marketing and advertising on the Washington side, and I know one question we've come up with quite a bit is basically advertising kind of over the border. And I guess I would kind of encourage and kind of ask you all if the OLCC plans to really communicate with the LCB in Washington about how those laws will interact. as far as basically business on the border advertising back and forth.
So, just so you understand, the Cole Memorandum specifically tells us not to be involved in interstate commerce between the two states. So you are probably not going to see this commission trying to engage in conversations with Washington about how that advertising works.
The first thing is about size grows, limitations, residency restrictions. I think all of us are just looking for a way to protect Oregon from Walmart and Kmart and everything else, and give the opportunities to the small business. So I appreciate that you guys are taking that issue seriously. The last thing then is with regards to the testing, would that fall under cost of goods sold, and would that be a tax deductible item?
That would be, but as you guys are all aware, there's really specific federal tax rules related to this. There were some deduction things that we had to deal with that OLCC is looking at working with Department of Revenue on.
And I agree that you shouldn't be heavy-handed in terms of seed-to-sale tracking, but clearly because of the Cole memo, and you don't want a product diverted into a black market, and you want to be able to track it for taxation. Clearly, you have to have a strong, robust seed-to-sale tracking system. But I would offer a cautionary tale relative to Washington, that you really approach this from technology perspective and not a policy perspective, so that when you adopt seed-to-sale software regulations or specifications for a database, that it allows free, open access to other software competitors, because that's really going to create what Marvin referred to as the Silicon Valley of Oregon. And Oregon has a unique opportunity to really create a connoisseur culture for marijuana and add to the technology perspective. So,
but my question is mostly about growers. Later on, when we get moving into this, how are we going to do breeding and seed sales, even within the state? And before that, how are growers going to obtain the seeds?
So the OLCC is asking the same question as part of the 3+ hour policy discussion we had this morning. We have asked the legislature to clarify that, because it's not clear from a policy position even what the OLCC should do related to that. Are we going to assume immaculate conception, and that's one? And that is what a lot of other states have done. But we have asked the legislature to clarify that from a policy perspective, because we don't want to send our staff out there into this unknown. So we think it's fair to everybody to at least clarify what we're going to do.
Hi, my name is Kelly, and I'm a co-owner of a lab, and also helped running a dispensary since 2010. I just come to give input from a lot of people I've been talking to, and the Oregon residency thing seems to be a big thing that's important to people here. Also with the medibles and concerning children, a lot of us feel like there's already something in place for that concern, which is criminal consequences. And I know a lot of people in this industry have kind of taken offense that we get the rap that we are not responsible adults around children. Also, when it comes to lab testing, I just ask that hopefully you get as much input from as many labs as you can instead of just 1 or 2. And then with that, when you're implementing the rules, you just keep in mind just as much input from the public concerns as there is from the industry, since we have the most experience in knowing what's efficient and how this can work best. Thank you.
What kind of the issues relating to banking are in Oregon? Because in Washington, the horror stories are just crazy with what people have to go through just to be able to put their money that they've made off of this industry in the bank. And so I was wondering.
So this is predominant, the banking issue is predominantly a federal issue. We just had the Oregon Treasury, as well as Department of Revenue, as well as M-Bank, which is a bank that is accepting depositors. We are in discussions. M-Bank has had some limited discussion with us related to what they're going to require of their customers. We certainly realize it's an issue. We don't have the capacity at the OLCC to once a month have Brinks trucks roll up to the front door with cash to pay your taxes. So we have the same concern at OLCC as well. So we are trying to work on that, but that is predominantly a federal issue that we can't control.
First of all, I just want to speak out in support of the canopy limits, because I believe that one of the main key purposes of this law is to bring marijuana production into a tightly well-regulated system. And I believe a key component of that is co-opting the people that are currently growing on the black market and so forth. And I can tell you that if it's not designed in such a way to co-opt as many of those as possible, they're going to just keep on growing because they've been doing this for a very long time. And so if it's not designed for that purpose, it's going to cause a problem. And having smaller limits will allow the little guy to have a chance to be able to take part in this industry in an economic way. And I would say that, in Washington, they had 21,000 square foot limits. They had 3 tiers. I can tell you that 21,000 square feet of weed, 1,000 to 2,000 pounds of weed is a lot of weed. Okay, so it's going to be a good size for everybody. 1,000 or 2,000 square feet of canopy is it's a lot of weed. The second point is, I am a Clark County resident, and I know that this is a main issue, so I don't want to really push anybody's buttons on this, but as a Clark County resident, I am a member of this metro area, and Clark County residents, we pay over $150 million a year in income tax revenue to the state of Oregon. And we're the 8th largest county in Oregon State as far as tax revenue. And I would just really like to have an opportunity to take part in the economic life of this community. So I would hope I know there isn't any actual residency requirements in the bill, and that'll be up to you guys to decide that. But I would hope that maybe
actually it's up to the legislature to decide.
Okay. I would just hope that whatever is decided, that taking into consideration the economic participation of adjacent counties, I would hope that you would keep that under consideration.
A couple concerns I have, just to kind of touch on the point that the gentleman just made, was if we're creating a seed to sale system, isn't that kind of contradictory to not allowing canopy limits? Because if it's seed to sale and you're trying to track it to make sure you keep it off the black market, but then you give farmers the ability to grow an abundant amount of product, that supply and demand, it doesn't work properly. I mean, it's inevitable that some of it's going to get to the black market. The second concern I have is commingling medical marijuana dispensaries with recreational use. In my mind, I've tracked this pretty closely. I've been part of the industry for a long time, and in my mind, the medical marijuana dispensary side was able to be established before the law was even voted on for recreational use. So anyone that wants to come into the business going through the due process of trying to do it with the legal parameters that we're given, we're not given an opportunity. I don't know if you do commingle those two, there's no real reason for you to have any licensing application for the recreational side, especially in the city of Portland. If there's that many retailers already out there on the medical dispensary side, and it doesn't give the recreational side the ability to tap into that market, what are we doing? What are we here for?
If someone buys, let's just say a brownie or even flour or whatever they buy, are they going to be able to look up where it came from, who grew it, if it's organic or any of that kind of stuff?
It's going to be tracked all the way through the system. I don't know that we're going to make that available exactly to the person. We're more into tracking the product, not necessarily the product back.
And will there be a tax write-off for people who get outside software to help pay for the software for seed to sale?
As we read the bill, or as we read the law currently, those will be cost of goods sold.
And I was just wondering how you guys were going to decide who receives the license.
So there's been a lot of questions sometimes related to licensing. There's no limit on licenses in the state of Oregon. The OLCC would have to choose to do that. We don't do that under alcohol regulation. We aren't down that path yet, but we certainly have heard not to have any restrictions on licenses everywhere we've gone, pretty much, for the most part.
What are the limits on THC per serving and per package? And what's the maximum?
We haven't set those limits, and those are going to be things that we're going to be having the conversation with Oregon about as we go through the rules process.
Because I know in Washington I saw about 100 milligrams per package, and I know there's users that use more than that in a day. I just know that'd be expensive. I don't know.
Yeah, we're certainly looking at setting a serving size standard, which is how we believe we're going to have to inform the public about it, what that size is and how much that is. We're going to have to, be able to put out there. So we're not sure what that is.
I'd like to say keeping the existing medical dispensaries and recreational dispensaries distinctly separate gives the recreational dispensaries a more even playing field, in my opinion. Okay. And the limits on the personal grows doesn't allow for enough of the next generation to keep a perpetual grow going. And 4 plants isn't going to last anybody a year unless they're like 12 feet tall.
My questions first was on a public level of public transparency. Will you make the public engagement statistics, so all this information that you've been collecting, will you make that information public so we know that actually what the people have spoken is actually reflected upon your actions and state and, you know?
Yeah, I think we're summarizing what's been done. So
Great.
yeah, we're trying to make that available, but we don't have very limited staff. So.
I understand, yep. And then the secondary question, you mentioned the 40-some items that you sent off to legislature for recommendation. I was wondering if that was sent out to be made publicly via your email listserv system.
Certainly, and we haven't adopted it yet. We're going to probably adopt it at the commission meeting tomorrow.
Okay, great. After adoption, it would go out.
Yeah, after adoption, it's going to be it's a public document as it is, but I mean,
yeah, exactly. No,
tomorrow it'll be available. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. And
all right,
then,
thanks.
Basically that my only statements are one, just a request to treat alcohol, to treat the cannabis similar to alcohol and tobacco, and specifically, or alcohol and wine, specifically. Alcohol is 100+ times, the most recent study, more harmful than marijuana, cannabis, medical or otherwise. And my request is just strongly to reduce whatever kind of bigotry is involved and to sort of have as much fairness and parity in whatever you're treating, whatever on, especially on the recreation market. And then the last is tourism, to make it available for tourism, and then fencing. With the fencing, it costs 40 grand to fence an acre, 50 or more. 8 to 10 feet high with cyclone fencing, which takes about 18 seconds to break through. That same 40 grand would create a security system with lasers and lights and freaking the whole 9 yards, auto tracking, auto alarms, much cheaper and much more effective for an electronic system than a hardware.
Okay, thank you.
And I want to highly recommend that we do ban edibles that are appealing to kids. There's several products that can be used that aren't attractive to kids, so I would like to see the edibles like the candy and the suckers and the gummy bears and all that be banned. Thank you.
Thank you very much.